Hello clarinets, this is Mr. Kruger. I hope you've had a good summer so far. I wanted to give you some tips, some help with your region music, especially if you don't have private lessons. This video could help you kind of digest this is for etude number 1, which has tricky rhythms. The first thing I want to point out though before we get to the rhythms is that we need to observe the key signature. So look over here. We've got one sharp, right? So that means that throughout the piece, like in measure 1 right here, this F is actually going to be an F sharp because of that key signature. All right, and so every time we read an F, it's really an F sharp. We're going to play F sharp. Okay, so you might mark those. Okay, mark your F sharps. Another one right here. Okay, all right, and so once you've got your F sharps marked, then the other thing you probably need to do is be really, we need to make sure we understand how to finger our accidentals. Like some of these notes, like what are they? Like A sharp. You may not see that note very often, but A sharp it's actually the same note in terms of how you play it. It's the same note as B flat. So you're going to finger it, it's going to sound just like a B flat. It's just written as a different note. So A sharp and B flat, they are we call them enharmonic notes, where they're spelt differently, but they sound the same, and you play them the same way. So in a lot of ways, they're the same note. Okay, so make sure you know that you finger A sharps how you would finger a B flat, and then you've got your C sharp. We should know that from our scales, and D sharp is the same. It's enharmonic with E flat. So if you know you're fingering for E flat, you would apply that to D sharp. I would also suggest with some of these that you consult a private lesson teacher to help you with your fingerings. And if you don't have a private lesson teacher, use a fingering chart. That should help. Okay, so let's get to the rhythms, because this is one of the harder rhythmic pieces out of all the instruments. But we can do it, all right, because we've got the information and you've got good teachers. Okay, so it says C here for your time signature. That would be common time, 4/4 time. But then if you look at this piece, it's got a slow tempo up here for performance, which actually, it's funny because that's a slow tempo, but when you have 30-second notes, like over here, you see how these notes have 3 beams? Okay, and actually there's some right here. Okay, and there's 30-second notes all over the place. And 30-second notes at 58 beats per minute are actually pretty fast. So what we're going to do, I've never been taught a counting system that works really well with 30-second notes. But what we can do in order to count this piece, and what we're going to do, is we're going to count it giving the 8th note the beat. Okay, so how many 8th notes fit in a measure in 4/4 time? 8 8th notes fit into a measure. So we're going to count it. We're going to put 8 beats in the measure, and we're going to tap our foot maybe at first to the 8th notes. Okay? So if I were counting this in 8, I'm going to set my metronome. It's going to be super slow because I'm at 68 beats per minute. Because if I'm tapping my foot to an 8th note, hold on a second. Let me turn that off. Let's think about this. If I'm tapping my foot to the 8th note, then a quarter note is going to get 2 taps because it's twice as long as an 8th note. We got to know our note relationships here, right? A half note is going to get 4 taps because it's 4 8th notes fit into a half note, right? So if I were going to count measure 1, I would count like this. 1 5 7 1, or something like that. Okay, it's kind of weird saying 5 and 7, but if you're giving it 8 beats, that's how you would count it. Okay, so that's how that would be played. Da, 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 da. I'm singing the wrong notes, but that's how the rhythm goes. Okay, and you of course would slur until you get to the G, and then you would tongue that G. Okay, now over here, this rhythm is kind of tricky. All right, well, we established earlier that a quarter note gets 2 beats, right? So it's going to get 1 and 2, and then it's tied to this dotted eighth. Okay, well, an eighth note gets 1 beat, right? So that would, sorry. So it's going to start on beat 3, and it's going to go into beat 4, right? Because, well, an eighth note would get 1 beat, but we're going to add an extra half because of that dot. Whenever you have a dotted note, it adds half of the note's original value. So this eighth note would normally get 1 beat, but we're going to add half, so it gets 1.5 beats. That's going to feel like a dotted quarter, okay? So you're going to count, this is going to get 3 and 4. It's going to feel like it gets 3 and 4. And then on the and of 4, you've got these 30 seconds, and you're going to count them, and then that would go 5, 6, 7, 8. So let me demonstrate how measure 2 would go. You would go like this. 1 and a 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 3. This first note is the hardest part. You really have to think. If you don't think, you're going to put this and in the wrong place. So you have to think 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. You've got to think those numbers. Okay, then over here it's pretty easy. We got 2 beats here. This will be 3 beats because we got a 2-beat quarter note tied to an eighth note. All right. This rhythm is almost the same as measure 2. So you got that same on the and of 4. You got this and it happens after beat 4. Okay. You see how that works? So this would go 1 and a 5, 7, 1, and then we get to measure 5. Okay, measure 5 is tricky. A lot of this is tricky. I probably won't cover the whole etude in this video just because it would take so long. But I'm going to try to get you to measure 8. Okay? And we'll see. I might send out another video once you've had some time to work on the first 8 measures. All right, so you're looking at measure 5. Measure 5, we got the quarter note. That's going to get 2 beats. So I'll write 1, 2. And then it ties to a 16th note on beat 3. Okay, well, here's the deal. I haven't told you how to count 16th notes if we're giving 8th notes the beat. But if you have ever run across 16th notes before, hopefully you realize that 16th notes, they're twice as fast as 8th notes. So if we're tapping our foot to an 8th note, and we're counting 1, 2, 3 for 8th notes, then the way we'd count 16th notes, we'd count them 1 and 2 and 3 and, right? So since this ties to a 16th note on 3, then we're going to start counting ands after the tie. Okay, so we've got an and, 4, and 5. And then this gets all of beat 5 because it's an 8th note. You see how there's only one beam down there? Okay, and then we go 6 and 7 and 8 and. So if you were going to count this, I'm going to bracket these or parentheses these, whoops, there we go. Parentheses these 3 numbers together because they're tied together. I got to put that metronome on because I'm counting with my metronome. All right, if I were going to count it, I would count like this. 1 and 4 and 5, 6 and 7 and 8 and 1. So 7 is hard to say that in one syllable, but let me count that again. 1 and 4 and 5, 6 and 7 and 8 and 1. 4 beats, 3, 4, 1, 3. I got my numbers mixed up, but that's how the rhythm would go, just with different numbers. Okay, now we're to measure 7. Measure 7, obviously, we got the same kind of thing we saw before. All right, so we've got 2 beats, and then we have it tied to 16th note, which happens on beat 3, and it gets half of beat 3. And since it gets half of beat 3, the next thing happens on the and. Okay, I'll put a plus. All right, so we get this 1 and, but then we have 32nd notes. We count those how we would normally count 16th notes. And so that would go and a 4E and a 5. Let me write that in. And 4E and 5, and then we got straight eighth notes, 6, 7, 8, and then 4 beats here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, and then that's off on 7. Okay, so if I count from 7 to 8, it'll go like this. 1 and a 4 E and a 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 5, rest, rest. I'm going to count the whole thing now. Now, those 16th notes still happen kind of fast with the accidentals. You might have to practice those even slower at first and then speed them up. Okay, so here's the whole thing. Forgive me if I mess up on my 8 counts. I'm going to try to remember to count to 8. I'm very used to, counting to 4, just like you. Here we go. 1, 2, here I go. 1, 5, 7, 1, and a 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 3, 6, 7, 8, 1, and a 3, 5, 7, 1, and 4, and 5, 6, and 7, and 8, and 1, 5, 7, 1, and a 4 E and a 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 5, off. All right, I hope that helps. It's tricky. I suggest that you count it many times.